folkies! I hope you're all well. This week, in week 7, we are talking about police oversight. So I thought I would record a very quick lecture about this particular issue. Now, this is a big issue. There are thousands of articles and books written about police oversight. So I clearly don't have the space or time to go over all of those. And I've given you a couple of really good readings to describe these issues in a little bit more detail. So the lecture I'm going to give you is not hugely long. It's just to give you a basic introduction of what oversight is. You can tell from my first slide that one of the key issues with police oversight is how it happens. It says, "Don't worry, I investigated myself and I found I did nothing wrong." This is one of the most common issues that we see with police oversight around the world, where the oversight mechanisms exist within the police organisation and involve other police officers investigating other police officers, which is not the best way forward. Tasmania Police, for instance, has a system like this. We really do need to think very carefully about the way that this impacts integrity and accountability of police organisations when we're trying to get the public on side and help them support police organisations so that police organisations can do their work better. If they don't see any particular organisation as having integrity or having accountability because they're investigating themselves, it's going to be a bit of a dodgy thing. And the public are far less likely to assist police officers with their processes in that instance. So that's why police oversight is really, really important. Police oversight is also important because police exercise a wide array of powers. They include the ability to detain, search, arrest, use force, take fingerprints or different types of samples, enter private premises and seize property, and of course engage in covert investigation and surveillance. We have a number of legal processes that exist that test the legality of any of these types of actions in terms of whether or not the police have lawful authority for a particular action. But in addition to the idea of the legality, an effective complaints handling system and investigation process can help to hold police more broadly accountable for how they exercise these and other police powers. So this is why it's very important that the community has a reasonable expectation the police will exercise their powers and discretion to the highest standards of competence, fairness and honesty. And this really great little article here by Cindy Davids, who's an associate professor at a uni here in Australia, she talks about this in a little bit more detail. So if you want to read more about it, have a look at this article. It's a really good one. So what does police oversight look like then? And there are a bunch of different things that this falls under. So there are codes of conduct, for instance, that we've already talked about, where there's expectations of what the ethical behaviours look like and how they will be carried out. So, for instance, Western Australia Police Force focuses on preventing crime, managing and coordinating emergencies, and enforcing the law. Honesty and transparency intersects with care and teamwork, integrity and duty, and all of those types of things, in addition to competence and education, conduct and governance, etc., etc. There's also internal policies that can be different forms of oversight, structures as well, and procedures and processes. So all of the different things that create or build internal control. These are often agency-wide, but sometimes they can also be limited to a particular department. And they are agency-wide for a reason, because all of the people in that organisation need to be united towards a particular end when it comes to policing work. So everyone needs to know about a certain type of policy around, sexual harassment of other police officers, and then all of the people need to be accountable for that policy across the organisation. And of course, there's things like risk assessment as well, where they identify potential, current and emerging integrity threats, and they actually do something about them. So there was an investigation a little while ago now that led to the creation of Stand, which is a department within the Victoria Police that was focused on educating police officers about how it's not okay to sexually harass other officers, but also that looked after the processes of investigating in conjunction with a particular task force. So out of these processes came quite a lot of comment about how homophobia was rife within Victoria Police. So they started a new process of investigating experiences of queer and gender diverse people within Victoria Police who were actually officers, so that they could then subject that to further assessment. So that became a risk. They saw the risk in that first investigation, and then they subjected that process to further investigation in a second process that in order to be able to raise the accountability and integrity of the organisation. There are external reporting bodies that help increase accountability and transparency amongst police organisations. In a lot of parts of the US, these are called civilian review boards that formally review police complaint investigations in particular. And you can see one of them there pictured on the slide. It also includes things like independent bodies like IBAC or the Crime and Misconduct Commission in Queensland, who have an independent process where they look at the investigation that police officers have conducted, and they look at whether or not it's been handled appropriately and whether or not there needs to be further discipline of officers. But they also have overwatch of the process where complaints about police officers are made directly to them, and they undertake a process of investigation so that, again, it increases the transparency and accountability of those police organisations overall. But that's done in an independent way. The police don't have any role in it other than as some people to be called to court. There are things like public interest disclosures as well, and I'm sure you're all aware of processes that, Chelsea Manning, for instance, was one of these folks, and a couple of others, Julian Assange. But there are police whistleblowers as well, and they do have processes to protect them. There was Cole Dillon, who was a key person in the exposure of the corruption that was investigated through the Fitzgerald inquiry, and he recounts his experience of being an officer in that environment, and in a book that he wrote about it after he retired. Competent investigations are really important as well as a part of police oversight, and this means internal misconduct investigation procedures. But it can also, obviously, any sort of investigation that is about a particular police officer in relation to misconduct needs to be competent, needs to be accountable, needs to be driven by a process to bring people to, the justice that they deserve. And there's a really great little video that talks about Tasmania Police's process for doing this, and the process is called Abacus. Now, again, there's still questions about that, though, about the idea that Tasmania police officers are investigating their own officers, but nonetheless, it's worth a look at this particular process. There's education for police and community as a form of oversight too. The more we educate police officers and bring things into the awareness of them, the less likely they are to have entrenched corruption, and they are more likely to have high standards of integrity. However, that doesn't necessarily mean it's all going to go away. This is just a way that we can try our best to reduce the numbers of those types of officers involved in corruption in the long term. And of course, there's community awareness as well, and education that needs to happen. So the community need to know what police misconduct looks like, so that then they can bring that misconduct to the attention of integrity bodies and so forth. So what sort of things should we engage in terms of oversight for policing futures? There's a few things that have been identified, and you'll see civilian complaint processes as one of them, but we've already got quite a big focus on that, but it is considered one of the best ways to process these forms of misconduct. And people time and time again in the research tells us that we need to develop these further. But there are also other things that we need to focus on, such as early warning and intervention systems. Sometimes officers have very long histories of misconduct, and if we had acted here instead of here, people literally wouldn't have died. There's also use of force reporting systems where the use of force policies are modified in order to ensure that, the situation with Rodney King, for example, doesn't happen again. So if officers are required to report, they may be more reluctant to use force that falls outside the boundaries of human rights and dignity, because they physically have to report every single instance of those forms of use of force. There's things like body-worn cameras as well, which have very much improved police oversight. And again, I think I've mentioned before the apps that you can put on your mobile phone, so you can record what you think is misconduct in real time, and that's automatically uploaded to a server. But I'm giving you a challenge this week in the discussion board to try and come up with other ways that you can improve police oversight too. Where can we go with this? What can we do to make things better? There are so many different ways that we could do this, I would argue, and the only limits are really our imagination in this respect. Anyway, that's all for now. I hope that was helpful, and I will chat to you all again soon. Bye!